What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Bridging the Gap here on the Jersey First TV network. As always, I am AJ Malillo,
I'm Stephen Rambolo.
playing with the mic over there. And you can subscribe to us over on Jersey First TV on YouTube. You can check out Bridging the Gap with Stephen and I, and you can check out Real Talk with Fernando and the Nader Narrative over there. And you can check us out on jerseyfirst.org where you can sign up for our newsletter and sign the pledge. And Stephen, we're recording late at night. If you can't tell by the sound of my voice, I'm tired. We've had to switch our recording date and time up because
Yep.
I started this week my internship over at Montgomery County's DA's office. So I'm super excited.
Woo!
Thank you. Please,
We're all proud.
hold your
We're all proud.
applause. So I'm excited about that. That should be a lot of fun this summer. Already shaping up to be a great time. Steve, how was your week?
It's one of those weeks that I just kind of like blinked and it went by. It was Memorial Day weekend, so I was, busy moving and grooving on the beautiful boardwalk at Seaside Heights, New Jersey. Running my little shop down there. I did run into the wonderful and great Ashley of Jersey First down there celebrating. So nice to see a familiar face. I thought for 1 second that I got recognized because she came up behind me and she goes, "Is that Stephen Rambolo of Jersey First Bridging the Gap?" And I was like, "There ain't no way." And I turned around and it was her. Still a lovely surprise. Other than that, just kind of another week in the books. I'll say that much. I made some really good progress with my fitness, getting pretty dedicated on a little bit of a new meal plan, trying to shape up a little bit. I got a few friends who are in competition season right now, so it's really motivating me to be more on top of my stuff. Been, sitting still holding my breath about Rutgers Law. Please get back to me. Let me in. Let me in. But other than that, it was a good week. Disappointing news when we talk about our books, but we'll get into that. And all in all, I think it's safe to say you had the far more exciting week with this new internship. How is that going?
Yeah, it's going pretty great. I'm over in the Norristown Criminal Justice Unit over at the DA's office, so that's pretty sweet. Pretty much the way that they split it up, there's like two pretty heavy areas when it comes to crime in Montgomery County. One's Pottstown and one's Norristown. So I'm over with the Norristown unit. So pretty much anything that goes on in Norristown, I'll be assigned to an ADA, dealing with a case over there. So it should be a lot of fun. So far interesting. I don't want to talk too much about anything. Don't want to even run the risk of bleeding into confidentiality. So I'm just excited. It should be a great summer, and maybe I've seen a couple trials so far. So maybe a cool trial down the pike. So pretty exciting stuff.
It is very exciting. I wish we could get all like the insider details, the good stuff going on over there, but
But you ain't
we'll
getting
save
it.
it.
You ain't getting it
We'll,
here.
we'll save it for the memoir.
That's right. That's right. The tell all in 50 years.
I was to say when the NDAs have all run out.
Exactly. But yeah, no, it's great. I really, the people there have been awesome so far. It's only been 2 days at the time of recording this, but I'm excited. I think that this summer is just gonna fly by. I so far the past 2 days have just flown by, so I'm excited
I think it's going to be a great opportunity for you. I'm excited.
for sure. Um, we got a little bit of a lag on my end tech wise. So if something does happen tech, I apologize beforehand if we lose one of us, but we'll try and get it back and make it work for the people.
Yeah, I'm crystal clear over here as long as you are.
All right, beautiful. So what do you say, Steve? What if we get into some book action?
Yes, I noticed how there is no plural there because it is just book action this week.
That's right. So let's start with you then, Stephen, and we'll explain to the people. It's the start of summer. It's a tough month.
Yeah, yeah. Tough month for me down here. A lot of changes with work, scheduling, bunch of stuff. And I know I originally, when we did the last book, I was like, yeah, I'm going to read Meditations. I got a few pages in and I was like, this is not a book that is worth like this conversation. It's much deeper. I don't think it's made to be like a burn through this in a month and call it a day. Like that is a lifelong reading journey. You constantly pull and refer back to, and more of a philosophical reference book. So I found that to be very ill suited for the goal of what our book club is about. So I started reading and have not yet finished because I had like a mid month, book swap and then a whole holiday weekend and work, and I'm a busy guy. Okay. But what I'm reading, if this will catch it, it's called The Aquariums of Pyongyang, and this is a book that I've wanted to read for a really long time. I've had it sitting on my desk for, I'd say, the better part of like 4 years at this point, just kind of looking at it and like, I can't wait to read that. I can't wait to read that. So what it is about, it's about this individual. His name's Kang Chol Hwan. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. But this is his memoir that he wrote, where he was 9 years old and he was put into a labor camp in Pyongyang, North Korea. And he talks about his experience there, the amount of years that he spent there, and then his eventual escape out of North Korea to China, and his journey to the United States, where he famously, in writing this memoir, ended up in 2005 sitting in the Oval Office with then President George W. Bush talking about the human rights atrocities going on in North Korea that, at that point, the world was not necessarily privy to the way that we are now. It wasn't, well known what life in North Korea was like that early on, in the 21st century. So from what I've read so far, albeit not much, uh, it is such an interesting book because he's detailing his childhood, what I'm reading right now, and he talks about how normal life seems when you are like a North Korean kid and you know nothing else. And he talks about the way that, the Kim family is sort of glorified, and how rations work, and the way that he talks about rationing of school uniforms. And there's these big ceremonies where, you know, these government representatives, these Communist Party representatives come and they make it this huge, like, it's almost like Christmas, he describes it as, where these kids have this like big assembly and the party members come in and they gift them these new uniforms on behalf of the supreme leader. And it's a way to usher in a new era of education and this and that. And, they get the same uniforms for the next 4 years and you're wearing it to school every day. And you can tell as he's writing this obviously as an adult, he does it, and it's very masterful. And I think it's going to make for a continuingly interesting read. Is he sort of imposes in his language this acknowledgement of the contrast between what it was really like to feel these things and what the reality of living in life was. Like, it seems so, beautiful, perfect, shiny, everything's great. But on the other end of it, it's like, this was really brutal. This was a really brutal place to live. It is not a fun place to be. And truthfully, it is a harrowing place to live and exist. And, his world gets flipped when at the age of 9, him and his entire family get put into a North Korean labor camp for something that his grandfather was accused of participating in. So you're also talking about generational punishment, which is a crazy concept to toy with at the age of 9. So, like I said, I'm chipping away at this book slowly but surely, and I'll try and get a double header for next month, and I'll be able to talk about this book and then another one. But I'm very excited to get into it, and I don't know, learn a bit more about what was so captivating a book that came out, almost 20 years ago at this point, that landed this gentleman in the Oval Office to meet with our president. So it's pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, it sounds like a super like enthralling read, something that really would bring you in, because it's so foreign to us, right? This idea of not only a tyranny, but some sort of generational, um, just attack on a people and a psyche and a nation. And who is the North Korean defect that was on did a bunch of podcasts? Was it Naomi Park? Does that sound right?
It might be,
Very similar
yes.
story. Yeah, very similar story, like fleeing through China, and that's another like harrowing story. And these like I guess expats of North Korea, the things they had to go through to get out of North Korea, and then they find themselves in relative freedom in China, but it's like they're just walking into another totalitarian country and state. So super interesting, super destructive story. And yeah, one of the most sort of chilling things to me is that idea of generate punishment, which is so foreign to us in the US. The sins of the father are not the sins of the son, and in this case, the sins of the grandfather are not the sins of the grandson. And so it's just like to imprison a family is really just to take the soul out of anything in the country.
Yeah. It's it's really, I'm starting to get to the point in the book where he talks about the relationship that he has with each of his family members, his mother, his father, and his, older brother and older sister. And I'm curious to see, as their journey goes along through life, how that changes once they enter, these gulags, and how it, affects the dynamic and the work. And it's almost, it is unfathomable to imagine being 9 years old and thrown into a labor camp with your entire family for something that your grandfather allegedly did. And I say allegedly, and it's important to me to say allegedly because we know how crime and punishment works in a tyrannical society like this. It's not so favorable of true justice. It's a lot of finger pointing, and there's nobody to stick up and defend you. So whatever the government says you did, whether or not you actually did it, you did it, and you're going to pay for
Right.
that. I
Yeah,
think it's very interesting.
I sat in a courtroom today where the judge, the prosecutor, the defense attorney, all were making it crystal clear to the members of the jury that like this is innocent until proven guilty, right? The state has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that this person committed the crime that they were on trial for. And the burden of proof is on the state. Just because they're accused does not mean they're guilty. Just because they don't say anything in the courtroom does not mean they're guilty. It's like such like a deep part of our conscience as a country that you kind of roll your eyes at it. But you don't roll your eyes at it much when you're somewhere else where that's not the case, right?
Yeah.
And and the other thing, it's like it's so crazy to me because and it's important to learn this contextually, is to learn about the Holocaust and the atrocities that happened in Germany in World War II. But this is happening right now. This isn't
Yeah.
1942 Germany. This is 2023 North Korea. This is going on right now as we speak, as we sit here and do this, or you listen to this podcast, right? So it's important to read these stories so that you can grasp that it's like this isn't some foreign past war and conflict. This is right now. This is a human rights atrocity that's going on as we speak, a real one.
Yeah. And to your point, I want to say that this book was put out, I want to say it was first published in 2000, and the one that I have is an edition from 2007 that has a preface from the author referencing the meeting that he had with George Bush, and he gives a little bit of insight to that. But just to your point, we are talking about a person who is alive. This guy right now, on the back of the book, it says he's a staff writer for a newspaper in South Korea. He lives in Seoul. Like, this man is still living. This is something that he experienced, and you could bump into him on the streets in South Korea. He was sitting, all of 15, to 18 years ago in the Oval Office talking about these things, like you said, that are just happening. And even in, recent American history, we have stories about the brutality that comes out of this regime with, and I'm so regretful that I can't remember the kid's last name, but his first name was Otto. Remember the kid that was early on in the Trump administration sent back? He was imprisoned for trying to take communist propaganda from a hotel. and they had put him in, through this really sham of a trial, put him in one of these gulags, and you know, Trump fought for this man's freedom, got him freed from the country, and they sent him back on a plane in a coma where he died. I think it was like 12 hours after he landed on American soil. Like this is a very real life, functional, brutal regime. And this book is providing a tremendous insight into what life is like for people who don't know that that is what they are living in. It's really scary.
For sure. And I can't wait to hear more of the story come next month. So
Yeah.
that's exciting. Exciting
How
stuff.
about you?
Um,
What do you got over there?
yeah, so I read C.S. Lewis's The Screw Tape Letters. This is like a compendium. So you see all of my tabs in here from the but I read The Screw Tape Letters, which is like one of C.S. Lewis's most famous books. And it's such an interesting read because basically it's written as a collection of letters that one demon writes to his nephew, right? So it's like an uncle demon writing these like series of letters to his nephew demon, and it talks about like the way to get somebody to start to live their life to go to hell, right? And he wrote it. C.S. Lewis wrote this. C.S. Lewis, if you don't know, is one of like the most famous British authors of the 20th century. He wrote the Chronicles of Narnia, and he wrote a bunch of other fiction stuff, and then he wrote a lot about Christianity. He wrote the book Mere Christianity, Screw Tape Letters, um, countless others, right? Just super influential writer. Was good friends with J.R.R. Tolkien, who wrote the Lord of the Rings trilogy, um, and the Hobbit, and all those books. Um, but Lewis wrote the Screw Tape Letters during World War II, right? And during World War II, he was writing this interesting through this interesting like juxtaposition of war, because he was talking about this spiritual war that goes on between the good and the bad, the angels and the demons for the human soul. And he was talking about it. And he was talking about World War II kind of through this lens, because the person, they call him the patient in this, like they speak in a very like medical terms about the soul of this person, right? The demon does to his nephew. So they're talking about the patient. The patient is like getting drafted as a soldier for the British, and how to use sort of these anxieties that are going on in the soul of every human being at the time, being worried about war, um, to their advantage, and literally everything in life. It's like, how do you use love towards going towards the bad? How do you use um, greed or anything, even like just the act of becoming religious? You can use that in ways that make somebody sinful and deceitful and turn against God. So it's a really interesting read. And I think the most interesting parts of this book is that C.S. Lewis talks about how he thinks the most proper book would have two perspectives, right? It would sort of be like the good angel on your arm and the bad angel on your arm. That like classic uh, icon of, what's that word that I'm blanking on it? Steve, help me out here.
Iconography.
Yeah, iconography, exactly. So it's like that classic iconography of good and bad. He was like, but I don't think that anybody is capable of writing the good. Like, I don't think you could do it justice. So he doesn't write that. But he also talks about in letters and prefaces to a later book called Screw Tape Gives a Toast, that like this was the hardest book he ever had to write, because he put himself in the mind of like a demon, basically. And he was like, it just ruined him. It was like super difficult for him to write it, but it was easy to write at the same time. The words flowed easily, but it just ruined his psyche. Um, but yeah, so that's like a little bit of the background stuff, but getting into it, and I know I mentioned this a lot. Nicomachean Ethics by Aristotle is one of my like favorite philosophy books, and he talks about the vices and virtues, and how living a virtuous life is to try and figure out when to use what vice appropriately. And I got that sort of, if that makes sense, sort of like this idea where you know when to use what vices. So there's a quote in it where he says, "Murder is no better than cards when cards will do the trick." Right? So you don't have to make somebody do the most heinous, awful, evil thing to get them down the road that you want them down. Speaking for the demons, right? You don't have to make them an evil person. You can make them just do these little things that are even seemingly good, and it will bring them down the road of temptation and vice, and lead them to sin and not live this virtuous, fruitful life. So, you know, he talks about things like people act in selfish selflessness, where it's like they're being self. They could get the credit for being selfless, right? They could get the look at me, I did this good thing type of idea. And we all done it. We all know people that do that, right? It's like you're not doing it because it's the good thing. You're doing it because you want the credit that you're a good person doing the good thing. Um, he talks about the concept of love, and the difference between positive love, which would be like willing the good of another, and love for power and consumption of another. And at the end of these letters, you realize that, like, because he's talking very affectionately to his nephew, and you're like, well, is there like some sort of a love between this uncle and nephew? But then at the end, it's like he fails because I don't want to. I mean, it's an old book. I guess it doesn't matter if I give away the ending. Um, the patient dies in war, and he winds up like ultimately giving himself up to God, and so this demon fails in bringing him to hell. And he talks about how, like, you failed, but don't think that makes me love you any less. No, now I get to consume you because you failed. Now I get your powers become mine, right? So it's like when you're reading through this whole time, it's you're like, is this like an affectionate thing? And it's like, no, it's not real love. It's a lust for taking that person away, or in this case, taking that demon and like encompassing them. So I think that that's a
Hmm.
super interesting idea. And he talks a whole lot about love, and you see this like symbolism that like of a relationship with God almost, right? So it's a choice of a woman or a man to be together is a symbolic relationship to that of like choosing to live with God in this case, and the love that's solidified within there. So basically, um, it's a super super interesting read. It's super super deep. It's not very long, and I highly recommend it. It's funny in parts, right? There is a lot of religious satire, and I think that the main takeaways, whether you're a secular person or a religious person, are that the idea of like the road to hell is kind of being paved in good intentions, or even bigger, it's the little things. It's doing all of the little things wrong or for the wrong reasons that ultimately create bigger problems. Um,
Hmm.
and that your fate is not fixed. You're in a constant battle for doing the right thing. You're in a constant war of your soul for trying to do the good thing, the right thing, the moral thing versus the wrong thing. And um, I think those are the big takeaways that a religious person or a secular person can take away from this book. It's the pileup of all of those little tiny things that maybe you don't realize in the moment, but you're giving in to something that isn't necessarily good. And then also that your fate isn't fixed. You can always reclaim your soul. You can always reclaim yourself and get back to doing the right thing.
I mean, hey, for a book that I've never heard of, this sounds pretty prolific.
Oh, I mean, it's huge. This is like a very very big book, and it's a big book that brings a lot of people that are of the secular side. C.S. Lewis does a great way of explaining his view of Christianity. And there's a lot of like big time thinkers that sort of changed their views on Christianity through reading C.S. Lewis, because he is like very much a logical, like reasoned thinker
Hmm.
that is also clearly very, very religious. So I think he's an interesting person to read for everyone, whether you are already religious or secular.
Yeah, I will say, I think one of the things that you mentioned, I took a little note on it that I thought was really interesting and just worth the brief commentary was the concept of like willing the good of another and how that is a different way to show love, and what love is sort of like, if it is what is good for that person, to love them is to let them have that, or to love them is to let them enjoy that. And I think that's a very, it's a concept I've been sort of enthralled with recently, and understanding that like your position as a loving person, whether it be for the love of, romance, the love of a friend, the love of whatever, is this constant battle and choice, like you said, of choosing to do the positive thing, choosing to do, the loving thing. And I think love is a very selfless act. And I'm curious if you have any commentary about, the way that this demon writes about the selflessness of love.
Well, it's sort of like, in a way, he writes about the opposite, right? Like you don't want them to do that. You don't want the patient to act in this manner of like actively willing the good of another person, even if it comes at their own expense, and not doing that for some sort of like platitude either.
Mm,
Like actively wanting somebody to do what is right for them, and even if that's at your own expense, right? So it's like you don't want them to do that. In this case, the demon doesn't want the patient to feel this connection, that sort of love and that sort of connection. They want a love of the body, more of that lust, or like getting what they want out of it, and
yeah.
sort of disregarding the other.
Hmm. It's very interesting. I've also, I think I'd be curious to like, obviously C.S. Lewis is not with us anymore. Um, but to hear him talk about what it's like to get into that headspace, like you said, he clearly struggled with it, and I couldn't imagine being such a devout and renowned author. Like, this is his craft, this is what he does, and to put yourself in that mind space, especially for somebody who, like, you're just telling everybody is so devoutly Christian, and has these beliefs that are inherently good, and to put yourself in this mind frame, I think that alone is a feat in and of itself worthy of acknowledging and picking up the book. Like I said, never ever have I heard of this, um, but I think it would be such a fun and interesting little read.
Yeah, yeah, and here I'll read a quick passage of him like talking about getting in that headspace. He said, "Though I had never written anything more easily, I never wrote with less enjoyment. The ease came no doubt from the fact that the device of diabolical letters, once you have thought of it, exploits itself spontaneously, like Swift's Big and Little Men, or medical and ethical philosophy of Erewhon, as Ansi uh, Garuda Stone. It would run away with you for 1,000 pages if you gave it its head. But though it was easy to twist one's mind into the diabolical attitude, it was no fun, or not for long. The strain produced a sort of spiritual cramp. The world into which I had to project myself while I spoke through screw tape was all dust, grit, thirst, and itch. Every trace of beauty, freshness, and geniality had to be excluded. It almost smothered me before I was done. It would have smothered my readers if I had prolonged it. But yeah, so super interesting read this month, and I think my next book is going to be Talking to Strangers by Malcolm Gladwell. So I'm pretty
Ooh.
excited about it. I'm a big Malcolm Gladwell guy. I think he's super interesting, and I just listened to a podcast where he was with Theo Vaughn, which was always fun because Theo Vaughn is such like a silly man, and when he
He
talks
is.
to the super famous, smart people. It's super interesting to me. So I'm excited for that. Should be a good time.
Very nice. As soon as I figure out what my book of the month for next month is going to be, as I tack them on, I'll let you know.
All right, sounds good. All right,
I'm
Steve,
looking at
we
a
got.
stack of them here, so I don't know. We'll see.
I trust you, man. You'll be fine. You'll be fine. But we do have two quick stories that we want to hit before we run, and we'll
Yeah.
we'll make them quick. And I think we'll start with the one that broke the day we're recording
Yep.
this.
Yep. Yep.
Former governor of New Jersey, uh, Christopher Christie, will be running for a presidential nomination of the Republican Party once again in 2024. I know he's one of Steve's top dogs. Probably what, Steve, ranking your favorite Republicans, is Chris Christie like number 3?
I'd put him like pretty far up there. I'd say he's
Yeah.
probably number 2.
Number 2. So let me see if I can guess your list, right? So you got George W.
Yeah.
is a high up there. Is he number 1?
I would. So if are we talking like current?
Well, I don't think you'll find any like super current, right? Like, because you got Chris Christie's like the most current you can get. But
There's one Republican who I will always have some sort of affinity towards, currently serving right now.
is it Mitt Romney?
It is. I love
Okay.
Mitt Romney.
So Mitt
I think that
Romney's
guy's
your
great.
number 1. Chris Christie's your
Yep.
number 2. George Bush and Arnold Schwarzenegger are like 3 and 4 respectively.
Yeah, they flip-flop.
They flip-flop. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Yeah. And I would just round it out on the top 5, and I'd probably put Abe Lincoln just because he's
okay. Well, I mean, he's like, he's transcends, It's like
I'm just saying.
Washington's my favorite, Republican. It's like these are guys that transcend the party.
If we were doing a top 5, that would be very loosely the top 5.
It's like I feel like that's like someone trying to say that Andrew Jackson's their favorite Democrat. It's like, yeah, okay, he was a Democrat, but
he's, yeah, I get it.
So Chris Christie's running, and you know what I think is a super interesting thing, and I think that if I'm Donald Trump, I don't want to get onto a debate stage with Chris Christie. If I'm Ron DeSantis,
Correct.
I don't want to get onto a debate stage with Chris Christie.
If I'm anybody.
Well, my thing with Chris Christie is I don't think he has a chance in hell of winning, right? I don't think he's got a snowball shot, but I do think he has the ability, and it's because I know he's done it before, to do the drive-by suicide shot where he takes himself out and somebody else with him. And I think what I will say about him is that I think he's the only person in this race with the guts to say anything to Donald Trump.
To Donald Trump, 100%.
Ron DeSantis won't say Donald Trump's name. Tim Scott won't say Donald Trump's name. Nikki Haley won't say Donald Trump's name. Right? The only one that is consistently willing to call him out is Chris Christie. So love him or hate him, that's an interesting lane to run in. The only guy that will call anybody out.
So, and I think that is going to be exactly his greatest strength moving forward. Like you said, Chris Christie, love him or hate him, the dude is everything that Donald Trump could have been. He is profane, but not too profane. He's sensational. He's kind of his whole shtick when he was governor was, I tell it like it is, and that's why the people like me. I don't give you the 30-second Washington DC speech that he hit Marco Rubio with back in 2016. Like he is very appealing in that sense that he's intelligent. He is a brilliant mind. Like he does great commentary. He had a very successful career, in prosecution. Like he knows what he's doing. He's well aware. But when he gets behind a microphone and he is addressing a crowd or he is up there on a debate, his ability to work a room, his ability to tap into what I would sort of say is common sense language for people is second to none. And I think now more than ever, when we kind of have like this second coming of Donald Trump, I think it's going to be a great tool for him. And I think it's going to take him a lot farther than people expect. And I would say never bet against Jersey, baby. We have some stars, and Christie, you're not exactly the guy for me, but I'm rooting for you. I would love to see him take it as far as he can go.
Yeah, again, I don't think he really legitimately stands a chance, but I think he's going to be on a debate stage. He's the best debater on in the Republican primary, and
Easily.
I don't think it's even close. I just
Easily.
think his name has been tarnished and is too toxic at this point. But I think he can really help clear out a field because he could take down
Absolutely.
people with him. So it'll be interesting to
Absolutely.
see. Yeah.
Well, that's the thing too about a guy like Chris Christie is he's not afraid to get in the mud and also like bring you with him. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
like
he's gonna pull you
he
down.
will he will throw mud and then he'll say, "Wait, but come check this out," and then pull you into the mud with him also. You know?
Yeah, which I mean, Donald Trump is very similar. But I think there's something to about 50% of the American population that is much more off-putting when in the style that Donald Trump throws mud. That Christie does
Yeah.
it in a very political style, so to speak, and Donald Trump does it
Yes.
in a very reality
It's
TV
sloppy.
style.
It's sloppy.
Well, I'll say it's reality TV, right? Because that's what he is. He's an
It's what he
entertainer.
did.
Yeah.
It's who he is. Yeah.
Speaking of primaries, though, Steve, we got one more story to round us out.
You're right. You're right. You're right. So we have an interesting story. We were talking about the primaries last time, and I thought this was interesting. I pulled this up. This was on the patch, and I've did some other research, and there's plenty of resources about this. And I thought it would just be interesting to talk about, maybe field opinions about the ballots for the primaries in New Jersey specifically. So I'm going to read this little excerpt. This was from a Rutgers University professor, and they explained this thing called the line, right? So this is the quote here. It says, quote, primary ballots used by the majority of New Jersey voters are organized around a slate of candidates endorsed by either the Democratic or the Republican Party. These slates of candidates are known as the county line or the party line. Instead of organizing primary ballots around the office being sought and clearly indicating which candidates are running for each position, most counties in New Jersey organize the primary ballots around a slate of party endorsed candidates. As a result, voters often have a hard time determining which candidates are running for each office, giving a huge advantage to those who land on the so-called county line. So I have with me here, and I'm going to unblur this background so we can throw this up and just show you what one of these looks like, because I am a registered voter and I did get a sample ballot mailed to my house. So we can use this here to, sort of take a look at what this looks like. Now, it's worth mentioning, like I said, New Jersey is the only state in the country that organizes their primary ballots in this way, and 19 out of the 21 counties in New Jersey do this. So there's a few exceptions to this even within the state, but a majority of voters, like the article had said, see ballots that look like this. So if you give me 1 second here, I'm going to get rid of this virtual background. Pardon the appearance here. But this is how it looks, right? So this is for my district where I'll be voting. And so you can see the way that it's structured is there's the Republican column. Now, we talked about this prior. New Jersey has closed primaries. So you have to register as Republican to vote for the Republicans, register as a Democrat, vote for the Democrats. So it's two separate ballots depending on which party you're registered to and where you're going to vote. But just out of curiosity and for the purpose of this, we'll look at the Republican column A and Republican column B. And if we go down, we see the candidates, and we were talking about these people last week because this is for the mayoral election in Toms River. Mo Hill is the one that has the Republican endorsement. He is the incumbent, and he is first on the list when it comes to your selection of mayor. So all of these people right here on this first column, if you were to go down the ballot, are the ones that have the support of the Ocean County Republican organization. Anybody that sits in the columns B, C, or D, as we see for mayor, there is a few of them, are the ones that have not earned that support. So this is something I've been a voter for, I don't know, how old am I? 6 years, right? And I never knew that this was the way that primary ballots in New Jersey were designed, and that there was, this sort of purpose to it to, I don't know, display favoritism. And there's a lawsuit currently going on. I don't know where it sits right now. I wasn't able to find too much information about it, but I've heard this referred to as gerrymandering of the ballot. So I'm curious, A, if you were even aware that this was an issue or something that was going on, and B, your thoughts about, the claims that this makes it confusing for voters or pushes, incumbents and makes it harder to win if you're not an incumbent because of ballot design.
Yeah, I definitely remember this being a conversation in years past during primary seasons and in like past internships and stuff that I did. There was a lot of talk about it being on the line, um, and I would say, I mean, really, like at the end of the day, it's just it's to keep the party machine going, right? It's like how do we keep the parties powerful, and it's through these little things like that, and that's how you keep the New Jersey Republican Party and the New Jersey Democratic Party like powerful and functioning and their endorsements mattering.
Yeah.
So I think that uh I mean it's super interesting. I just don't really know, you know, I understand why it's an issue for especially when people are running against incumbents in primaries and whatnot. But at the end of the day, I'm not really sure if how much of a change it's going to make. Um, I think people vote down the line in general elections and in primary elections, right? It's like, and you kind of have to fight to get. I guess you have to fight to get the endorsements, and that's what a primary election really is. It's like who's endorsing who, and
Yes.
I think that that's kind of just part of the game.
So the thing that gets me is if you were to vote down the line, right? It is so hard to tell what office you are voting for. You know what I mean? Like if you just go straight down, like why is mayor all the way down here? You would imagine that mayor would be top of the ballot,
Well, they
right?
start with the statewide positions and then they go down. So it's like you got your state senators and then your state assemblymen, um, and then
Your
you have
surrogates and
board
your
of
boards.
commissioners, yeah, and your surrogates. So it's
I
like
I
statewide
get that.
position down.
But so let's say because mayor, at least for the purposes of this one, has the most people running, right?
Right.
You come down and mayor, like if you're just going down this, you're never going to pay attention to these people. You're going to be, what are they doing out here? And then let's take a look at something like, I don't know, what is this? Is this a member of council at large? There's nobody even in column C. It goes A, B, D.
Right.
What did that guy do to deserve being put in column D and not actively stacked
Well,
up next to the people that he's running for that office for?
it seems like they're running, all of the people in column D are running together. Right? Like what's written underneath their names in column D?
Safe Times
can't
River.
Right. So they're all running under the same platform.
Yeah.
They're all running.
I just think it's very interesting that
Well, I
there's
think
so
it's
much
interesting.
disparity.
I think it's interesting that I would imagine like the ballot makers would just flip columns C and D.
Right, you would imagine.
Just to make it a little bit more aesthetically pleasing, at the very least.
Right. If nothing else, for the aesthetics.
Right.
I'm curious to see, like I said, there's a lawsuit out and about. It began last year and it was, given the AOK to carry on through the legal system to see if there's a way that we can, I don't even know, remedy the way that we design our primary ballots in the state of New Jersey. But I do think that for some people, I agree with you. There are people who just go, straight down the line, and that's, what it is. And I guess an ignorant voter is better than a non-voter, but I would prefer it if we made these choices a lot clearer and we gave people, fair positioning on a ballot. Location is everything. It's like real estate, right? Location, location, location. If your name is first on that line, nobody, when they are, running in to vote and maybe they waited online for 10 minutes or they're squeezing it in after work, they're not going to sit there and take the time and go, oh, here's mayor. Let me read across the 5 things.
Right.
These guys are on the line. We'll take them all.
My only issue is like when you're combating it, it's like somebody is going to be first. Like somebody's going to
Yes.
be the first name you see. So you can't cry wolf. Like, I guess not cry wolf. You can't cry um, unfairness anytime your name isn't first. It's like kind of like I don't really have a problem with the incumbent being the first name you see.
I
I
just I think it's worth referencing again, like you said, that it favors the establishment. It favors the people who have the support of whatever the organized, established party is, wherever you may be located. And since this new uptick in populism over the past half decade or so, I think that there's been a lot of resentment towards the concept of establishment, towards people being put up because that's who, the anonymous Ocean County Republicans think is the right person to put up. I think a lot of people wouldn't buy that. And if they found out that they were kind of being subliminally showed that on their ballots, it would be a big problem.
right. So I think that the education is the bigger thing. It's like educating people as to who you see, why you see them, where you see them,
Yeah.
and then you'll start to see that shift. Um, I think genuinely, Stephen, and this might be a cop out, and call me out if you think it is, but we're running out of time. Um, it comes down to the fact that guess what? Civics not mandatory education in the state of New Jersey.
It is not a cop out 100%. And I was going to, if you did not make the point, I was going to say, I feel like so many of our conversations about issues that affect New Jersey voters, New Jersey constituents in general, come down to this lack of understanding about civics and not having the full grasp or full access really at such a young age to understand the mechanisms that, design, support, and form our government both at large nationally and here at home, and is very tactile to things that make a difference in our lives. And for some reason, civics is just poof out the window. I would be curious to know how many people in the state of New Jersey were even aware that we were having, primaries for some of these elections coming up in a week.
Right.
That would be a very telling statistic to get. So,
Yeah.
not a
Yep.
cop
And
out at all. I'm riding with
it's
you on that.
especially state and local elections. I think it's so hard to drive traffic for, when you can be tuned into the problems of, you know, France because of your iPhone. So it's like
Yep.
when you can be tuned into all these global problems, people don't look at the local ones as heavily, I think, even though they affect them more. So at the end of the day, I think it comes down to education. If you can educate people, exactly what we're trying to do, with this show, it's like, why are you seeing these things first? Then you'll start to see shifts in that. And where things are put, where names are put, won't matter as much because people will understand what's going on.
And I just want to double down on that. And I want to say that, in my opinion, is the real key to starting a grassroots movement for anything, is civic education about, the nuanced and important details of the things that make government work the way that it does. That is grassroots, starting at the very bottom, starting with education of our children and giving them the tools to make informed decisions when they become adults, and it's their time to participate in their civic duty.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better myself. And let's call it right there, Stephen, because it's getting late and we gotta be up tomorrow.
It
So
is.
for Jersey First TV and Bridging the Gap, I'm Adrian Malillo.
I'm Stephen Rambola.
And we'll chat with you guys next week. I hope you all have a lovely, lovely weekend and get out there and start enjoying the summertime.